Okay, welcome back, and we have another very short video, well, 13-minute video from over an hour's dive. This one, this is in Pannakin Plains Cave. It's the first video that I've done for any dives that we did in Pannakin Plains Cave. You can see in Pannakin Plains very early on that the galleries are really quite large, and because of the size of them, they essentially just suck all of the light out. Makes video very hard to take, and really minimises the impact of the lights that we were using. Here we just had a brief discussion about whether we should run and jump on that first set of markers or not, and we decided not to because there was essentially a fairly deep jump. We were already at about 27 meters here, and that would have run us down to about 35, and the idea was to try to stay as shallow as we could to not clock up deco at such a fast rate. In fact, every dive we did in Pannakin Plains Cave, we racked up decompression time. In general, the average depth was about 27 meters. But in contrast to Mara El Elavine from the previous week, the temperatures were much higher in here. The water temperatures were between 22 and 23 degrees, and in the cave itself was around 26.5 degrees, and quite humid in the lower cave zone against the water. There was a transition about halfway up the cave where it went to fairly cold air in contrast, but down in the depths of the cave it was actually really quite warm. Quite a few cuts in this video, and again I was just trying to remove a lot of the dark film and also the long sequences. Still an orange line there, so that's the main line. You can probably see from the bubbles there's another diver leading the dives. You can see it's light in the distance. Again, my friend behind taking the video, the only one with the camera. The OK signal. At this point we'd actually run a jump across. Cut that bit out because we've seen that before. But essentially the lead diver was going through looking for tie-offs, and we came to this sort of large opening in contrast to what was around. And we're sort of looking down in the hole, and I wasn't sure what the lead diver was thinking. We hadn't planned to do any sort of penetration, and this was a really very, very tight hole. Very, very clearly silty. You can see there's a little bit of silt already coming off just from putting lines down and coming even close to that rock. And I wasn't quite sure what he was telling me, so I'm signaling back to him saying, "Doesn't that look really tight?" And he's saying, "Yeah, it is really tight." then I'm saying, and then it's really silty. I'm giving the hand signal for silt. And I think he understood that I was a little bit confused as to what his intentions were, but he never had intended to go into the hole. He just wanted to go over and have a look and see how it was. He then turned the dive, which I communicated back to the third diver. So in this part, the third diver will turn around, he will lead us back out of the jump. And we immediately see lights off in the distance, and that is the other 3 people that were diving in Pannakin Plains cave at the same time as us. So there were 2 different teams, and those guys are on scooters, all rebreather divers, and they're heading off to the end of the main line to sump 2, I believe, on this dive for them on that day. A few points you can see a little bit of silt in the water, and it's not normally very silty in this water, but there are a few points where we had stopped along the way along this side, and just the fact that we were breathing and causing bubbles, when we stopped it would literally start to snow large particles of silt from the ceiling. And it was a constant feature of this cave, even swimming along, that some of that would actually drop on, to your head as we were swimming. So it's really quite powdery on the surface of some of the rocks. The rocks on the sides of the cave are quite solid, but on the roof of the cave, it's really quite powdery. And there is a lot of silt in this cave, but the galleries, especially in this part, are absolutely huge. You can see some of the depth down there. Gets down to around 36 or 7 meters, I believe. And like I say, we stayed up at around the 27 meter mark, so goes to show the clarity of the water that you can actually see the bottom there. You don't really get a great impression of the actual size of it. It's enormous. And the rock inside this cave, in contrast to Mara El Elavine, is absolutely completely different. The structure of the cave, the type of rock, is worlds apart, and they're about only 17 or 18 kilometers away from each other. Here we are coming away from the walls and following that jump back across to the main line, which had crossed the main room. And you can see how dark that was, and I did cut that bit because really there was nothing to see but essential blackness and a little bit of torchlight. This is us now coming back to the exit of the cave. Heading at least towards the exit, and so we're still obviously following that main line. It was a reasonably heavy silted zone, and I can't quite recall exactly where it was, but a couple of days before, one of the guys on the scooter had an issue that they had to sort out, and they essentially stopped on some rocks, and when they took off, essentially blew up a whole heap of silt, and left a very small part of the cave reasonably heavily silted. Didn't cause any danger, didn't cause any issues, so there was no problems in that regard. But it was very interesting to see, in comparison again to Mara El Elavine, where the silt would simply drop away and be gone in minutes. The silt here, whilst it did lighten off considerably, enough to be able to pass through it without any visual problems whatsoever, it did hang around for the entire dive, entire 4 or 5 days that we're in the cave. So looking around at different holes and different deep pockets. We did try to stay away from too much deep exploration because we didn't want to spend large amounts of time decompressing. And I think as it was, our longest decompression was about 15 minutes. Very long, large cave. And there were times when we were swimming along the line and finning at a reasonable rate. Not never fast, but at least at a reasonably efficient rate, and it always felt like you were going nowhere due to the vastness of the cave. Now here we are coming up to around the 7 meter mark, and you can see some cylinders lying on the rocks there, and that's where we had left our 50% oxygen mixers to help accelerate our decompression. We had a long discussion about how we were going to handle decompression in the cave. All three of us had a 50% mix. We had verified 50% mixes, and we decided to leave those cylinders at about the 7 meter mark so we could collect them just before coming up to our decompression stop, essentially where we wanted to run most of our decompression to get onto those mixes. Because we were all satisfied that we all had that 50% mix, you'll see that none of us essentially did a gas check or reg swap as you normally would in technical diving, and it's always good practice to do those things. However, due to the nature of what we were doing, we decided to expedite that part for two reasons. Number one, we were satisfied that everybody had a 50% mix, and we had left that 50% mix at around 7 meters, so there was simply no risk of choosing a wrong gas and having some sort of gas problem episode. In fact, I moved from about that 7 meter mark very quickly up to the 4.5 meter mark, where I chose to do my decompression. And that is a brief dive into the Pannakin Plains cave. I hope you enjoyed.